Welcome to Our Future is Kind, a podcast exploring how we build the future we want to live in, one kind act at a time. I'm your host, Michael Neece, president of Our Future is Kind, and your companion in conversations about kindness, leadership, connection, and courage. Each week, I sit down with thoughtful leaders, creators, and bridge builders to explore what a healthier, more humane future could look like, and the choices it takes to build it. These are honest conversations about purpose, culture, curiosity, and what it really means to show up for one another at work, in our communities, and in everyday life. Along the way, we'll unearth practical ideas, small but meaningful acts, and questions worth sitting with, because building what's next is a choice. So let's dive in. R. Scott Holmes is an intuitive energy practitioner and transformational coach using Reiki, polarity therapy, Rise, theta healing, universal white time healing, and find your voice coaching. His background includes formal medical training, writing books, and volunteering for hospice. Mr. Holmes, welcome to the program.
Why, thank you very much, Michael. I really appreciate this.
So glad to have you here. I gave that brief introduction of you, but I would love for you to tell us, really, what makes you you?
Wow.
It started off with a profound
You do
question.
really want to flesh it out, don't you? So 9 years ago, I had lost my wife who had a 20-year breast cancer battle. And being a caregiver for all those years, and especially over the last couple of years, really was very, very, very limiting in that the only thing that mattered was her medication, doctor's appointments, her daily care. And as it got further along, because she passed away at home, I kept her at home. Promised her that she had done enough residency in hospitals that she would never have to go back again. So after that, I was kind of left, and I'm thinking, okay, what do I do now? Who am I? I don't know anymore. So much of my identity was as a caregiver. So much of what I did was taking care of other people. And I started wondering, do I start over again? What do I do? So someone said, hey, we're going to a Reiki class. Do you want to go? I'm like, oh, okay. And I fell in love with it. And I started doing, before you can take Reiki 2, after Reiki 1, you have to do self-Reiki for 2 months. And I do it to this day. And that's 10 years later. I do self-Reiki every single day. That is what brings me back to me. Because I found that started that process of me finding out who I was. That really, really did. And then all the other modalities we talked about, polarity therapy, white time universal healing, all of the theta, all of those were just the next step. It was, I'm sure you've talked to people who've done the self-healing journey, and it's never sequential. It's not like mathematics where you have to learn and you build and you go on. It's over here, 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 whatever rabbit hole you want to go down to be able to captures your interest. And in that process, I found that I truly loved and found myself and loved myself for the very first time, because I found out who I was. My identity was so caught up in family and caregiving that I didn't know who I was anymore. And in doing this, I've traveled. I always wanted to travel. When I was 18 years old, I wanted to write, I wanted to travel, and I wanted to teach. Those three things. I'm 18 years old coming out of high school. Well, at 5, I was married with 3 jobs and 3 kids. And so life kind of got in the way. And I loved being a dad. I loved all of that. The challenges were many, but we got through it until my wife was diagnosed, and then it got further and further along. And so that's where I found myself, is in those practices. I don't know about you, but when I find something, I want to share it. When I first learned all about energy healing and all this stuff, people would be walking down the street, and I'd look at them and go, I know how to fix them. Of course, if you walk up to them and say, hi, how are you? I know how to correct you, to fix you. they don't necessarily take it very well. As much as you want to be able to share it, it has to be in the right time, and it has to be, people have to come to you. And so that was the hard part for me, because I was so excited about all of this knowledge that I had that I wanted to share it. And so in doing this, I found writing. And the writing really made me think, made me really discover who I was. You and I are linked through Brave Healer Productions, Laura DeFranco, and I've written 15 pieces for her right now. And in each one, I find that I heal in writing that chapter. And granted, we're at the end of it, we bring tools in for people to be able to use on a daily basis. But it's our story that we heal from, that we see from this perspective. And for me, that means everything. I always think of writing as alchemy, because you take a pencil and paper and you turn it into feelings, lead into gold.
Right. I love that. So let's backtrack just a little bit. The writing process. Do you remember the first chapter that you wrote?
I can't remember the title, but it was for Sacred Death. And it was about my journey through caregiving, and how caregivers need the support. Caregivers need to heal. And how you give so much of yourself away that you can't find yourself. And that's what helped me on my journey the very first time, to be able to let people know it's okay to be able to want to take care of yourself. You know, it's very hard as a caregiver. You know, my wife is bent over the toilet, losing everything in her system. And it's really, really hard at that time to say, you know, this is really hard for me. You know, it's very limiting. I mean, there's so much. So all of your needs, everything that you think, everything that support, the support goes to the patient. The support goes there. And as it should. But the caregiver loses parts of themselves along the way. And that's where that kind of healing really needs to take place.
And now you take that healing, and now that you are an energy healer, you take that and help others. I understand that you have a book that is coming out right now that you've led. Can you tell us, is that about the energy healing? And tell us about the book.
Wow. So last August, I'm sitting down in Cape Cod on a balcony overlooking the ocean, and I have a discussion with Laura. She says, "You need to write a book. You need to lead a book." And I'm thinking, I don't know if I really want to do that. And all of a sudden, came out on the page, and it said, "From Burnout to Burning Bright." And I'm like, burnout? Wow. In the world that we live in now, with all the changes that are going on, and they are happening rapidly, people are lost. They're feeling that overwhelm. When they make decisions, they make them based on what they know, right? Anytime we make a decision, it's like what we know, where we want to go. But when that foundation is just constantly in movement, it's hard to make a decision, because you don't know which way the wind is blowing. You don't know which way it's going to go. You don't know all of those things. And that sense of uneasiness, of being ungrounded, really brings it forward, that the overwhelm just comes and it gets worse and it gets worse and it gets worse. And there's different aspects to overwhelm. A lot of people, it's been well documented in work, you know, when you're getting paid salary. So you realize that you're working 60 to 70 hours a week in order to get the job done. And I've been there, done that. I have the T-shirts, and it's never easy to be able to back off that once you get more and more and more, because you feel like you have to do it because, oh, wait a minute, there's nobody else in the company. There's nobody else that knows what I know. I have to do that. But what happens is that loss of the rest of it, your personal life, who does it take away from? What are the responsibilities that you can't do because you're involved in that? But the other aspect of that is overwhelm in life circumstances. Now, the 24 authors, the other authors in the book, really dug down deep about their overwhelm, the point in their life when they felt totally helpless. And when you're there, you're in survival mode.
Yeah.
It's very hard to think kind thoughts. It's very hard to think any thoughts other than, oh crap, I have to get up at 5 a.m. in order to get everything done before we go to work in order to do this. There is that sense of tightness, and when you can't shut it off and you're always running on that, it's limiting. So the overwhelm becomes just like a tidal wave washing over you, and you don't know how to go or which way to go because you're drowning. So in all of these stories, it's about the stories of the authors of where they went through it and how to be able to learn how to breathe again in that tidal wave that you're in. The micro changes that happen in order to start coming out of that. And sometimes overwhelm lasts for years. I was in a job for 3 years where I just didn't know how to get out of it. I didn't know which way to go. I was stuck. At one point, that was the same for me. And it wasn't until I made the decision to set the boundaries, bring it back, and be able to look at life differently that I saw that I did have choices. So it's all in reading the book. What I really hope for is people to be able to recognize when overwhelm is happening, when they're in that survival mode. They might not even recognize it at the time.
Sure.
And then what are the tools to be able to get out of there? What are the guidelines? How can I get out of this? It doesn't happen overnight. It happens slowly. When you're in overwhelm, you try the long weekends. That doesn't happen. You try the week-long vacations, and that doesn't work. You try all of this time off, and it doesn't change anything. How you change your daily life. And that's where I really found that most people miss the boat. They get up and they start running and they forget about themselves.
Yeah.
And what I ask people to do in my practice and in everything that I've written is to give themselves at least the first 10 minutes of the day for themselves to be able to set themselves right, to be able to come into their body, to be able to understand what's going on, to be able to take that breath and just bring everything down before the day starts. Because when you start from that place, all of a sudden the day looks so much different.
Well, good financial planners tell you to pay yourself first. When you get that next big check coming in, you need to set aside what you need for you first. Otherwise, if you wait to do that till the very end, you'll find you'll have pennies that you need to be paying some sort of, big thing for yourself. And it sounds like this is a similar thing, but with self-love, self-care.
And that's where it all starts. Because if you can't give from an empty cup, said many, many times, and when you're in survival mode, it's all outgo, no income to hear. You don't get filled in that, and you aren't able to do the things that you love that fill you, whether it's walking in the park or taking an hour to knit or whatever that aspect is that calms everything down, that fulfills you. And the other aspect of that, by the way, is joy. I ask people who are in crisis, what does joy look like? And this blank expression comes across their face because they have not experienced it in so long.
Yeah.
Why are we here if it isn't for joy?
Yeah. Well, and that, of course, brings up a co-authorship that we did with Sherry Elise. For anybody who's watching along, I'm pointing to the book right now, but Joy Unleashed with our fearless leader, Sherry Elise, who is a great TV personality, but a lovely soul first and foremost. And talk about that experience and discussing, how you think you can unleash joy. Wow.
Okay. One of my favorite pieces I ever wrote was with this book, Joy. And I'm thinking, I really started off by thinking, where did I find joy through my life? And I went back to my childhood and everything, playing kickball in the backyard and hearing the ice cream man come. And that excitement of, what are we going to get? How are we going to do this? All of those aspects of growing up. And I had a wonderful childhood. There were 14 kids within 3 years of age, within 2 blocks of where I grew up. And we all were very, very close. So we all played tag or city stroll or softball. or wiffle ball or kickball or just anything that you could think of. Everybody was always around this. There was somebody to play with, so much so that we built a treehouse. Now, the treehouse started 3 feet off the ground, and it was this little platform. And I first did it because my dad said, can I build a tree? And he's like, sure. And so it was 3 feet high, and I stood on it. And I went, wow, this must be what my dad feels like. He's so tall. I was so excited. And then I brought my friends up, and they said, hey, we could build a real treehouse. And so we built the next platform up, and we put walls on it, and then we put a roof on it, and like, wow, this is great. Hey, we can go even higher. It ended up after 3 years of constant building, of not having anything bought. This is all just leftover stuff that everybody had in their yards. Wow. 7 stories tall. And when we stood on the top step, we overlooked, I don't know if you know what a 3-decker is, but it's an apartment building that's got 3 floors, flat top roof. Okay. We would stand on that and would look over the 3-deckers that were 45 feet tall. And it would hold 25 kids in that treehouse. Just, yeah. Wow. It was just went up so high. So it was these parts of joy, those aspects of joy in my life that when I remember them, bring me back to that feeling of, oh, wow, that was just so joyful. Yeah. And in doing the joy book, it was a lot of curiosity about what can we do? What can I do? How can I find joy in my life today? Right. In the smallest parts. Yeah. And when you're going slower, I don't know about you. I've driven through neighborhoods before, and then I've ridden a bike and I've ridden through, and you see different things. But when you walk through that same neighborhood, you really pay attention to things or things you don't notice as you drive by. I find that's really a wonderful way to show how going slower allows you to see more. I love that. Being more mindful just by taking a different pace. That's wonderful. So yeah, Sherry Elise, if you're listening in, thanks for leading that great book effort on Joy Unleashed. I know that Scott and I both had a great time doing it. Amazing. Yeah. Well, as you know, Our Future is Kind is a podcast that really focuses deeply into kindness. And we've tangentially talked about it, a little bit of self-kindness, a little bit of like spotting something in people as they're passing by and saying, ooh, I could help that person. So clearly you have this focus of trying to spread kindness. But how do you think about kindness? Where does it fit into your life? Compassion. I was really thinking about this because I know that the focus that you have, for me, it's about compassion. How, if I was in their position and their circumstance, in their shoes, how would I want to be treated? What is it that is their greatest need? And I try to look at that. And we talked before about this, about the difference between kindness and being nice. Being nice, we always thought, don't ruffle feathers, don't say anything unkind, but there's a lack of authenticity there. And there's a lack of connection, true connection. I think of kindness as much deeper. Nice is in front, kindness is from the heart. And it's truly about connecting with people in the right way. And I know your next question is going to be, what does it look like years from now? Right. What kindness? Yeah. So, and I thought a lot about this because I just got back from Egypt. I did 2 weeks in Egypt, sailing on the Nile. I understood what the word timeless truly meant. We're going just sailing along on a 150-foot boat and watching the shore just pass by. And there were water buffalo, and there are cattle, and there are donkeys, and there are small cities, and then there's farmland. It was absolutely amazing. The reason I travel is because of perspective. Perspective. I've been to Asia, been to Europe, South America, and now, I guess, Africa, unless I'm going to Antarctica. Everyone in the world wants the same thing for their family. They want safety. They want their children to do better than they did. I think that is so common. They don't want you just to survive. They want to succeed in whatever they're doing, whether they're a farmer or I saw a true blacksmith. No matter if they're driving a bus, no matter what it is that they're doing to provide for their family, they look at the same thing. I was in Thailand and it was Halloween and there was a man in the street and he's burning money, literally taking money and he's burning it. Antithetical to anything we Americans would even think about, right? But he was honoring, it was a way for him to honor his ancestors.
Mm. Interesting.
And everybody does, we think of Asia. Asia is where so much of the population of the world is. And they have certain ways of doing things. And their cultures are so much older than ours. And they have a wisdom and understanding. And those perspectives, as I traveled, trying to integrate it, to understand it, to be able to understand the energy, understand the thought process behind it, has changed my perspective on things. There's no one way to, anybody, anytime. All right, let's admit, anytime anyone comes to you and says, there's only one way to do things, it's my way, let me show you, because without it, you're never going to get anywhere in life. And I'm thinking to myself, that includes the billions and billions of people in this world who are all wrong in the way they live their lives.
Yeah. No, it's interesting how we can get into the me filter so deeply that we can't see beyond it and recognize others. I mean, the ego, there's a place for a healthy ego, but there certainly is the unhinged ego that can propel us into thinking that, there is only one way.
Because we all have our own perspective. Everyone has a perspective. They can only see it from their way, right? But it's just allowing that there is so many more ways to look at the same thing.
Mm.
In working with patients and clients, their circumstances don't change. But then when you change their perspective, when they can look at something a little bit differently from up here,
right,
all of a sudden the same thing looks a little bit differently.
Mm.
And it creates a different feeling. It creates a different understanding. It creates just that slight change makes an incredible difference. With all the turmoil that's going on in the world today, and it's not just the fact that at the moment we're at quote unquote war or battling other people, but there's always a war going on somewhere in the world. There are always that. And it seems to always about power and money and opportunity. People given their regular life would never be at war.
Mm.
You go to a village and everybody lives in cooperation. You go into the third world, everybody lives in cooperation.
Yeah.
Someone has goats and they milk the goats, okay? And they trade that for somebody who has chickens, who has eggs. And they trade it with somebody who has sheep and they get the wool and the fiber. So it's a cooperative community and they're self-sustaining. And I believe that's what mankind truly is.
Mm.
Forcing other people to believe the way we believe never works.
Yeah. Well, it's that ego. It's the idea of it's my way and you have to do things my way or you're wrong. And, yeah. It's so when you think about the future, let's go ahead and go down that path. Let's go deep into it. Right. So we get in the time machine, move the controls, and we're going to go 100 years in the future. And I say, hey, Scott, we did all the right things. We did all the right things. We did them so well. So we step out into the year 2126. It's going to be the best possible future. What does that future look like? What are you looking for?
That sense of cooperation constantly. I don't know what you experienced after 9/11. But right after 9/11, all the way through the beginning of the year, there was a different sense in people here in the States.
Yeah.
People looked each other in the eye. People acknowledged one another. People there was consideration for somebody else. Everybody wasn't just wrapped up here with the blinders on. They had a much bigger sense of not just themselves, but that we were all in this together. And there was that incredible sense, whether you went, I saw neighbors who hadn't talked in years walk across the street to check on somebody else.
Yeah.
It awakened that sense in the people that I knew and saw on a daily basis to that there was humanity, there was kindness, there was that compassion, that we were all in this together, and that whatever happened, we had each other's backs. And the reason I bring that up is because that's what I see that future in 100 years, is that we realize all this money we spend on military, all this money we spend on all of that, every person in this world could live well, not just survive, but live well with all of the wealth that gets put into military, with all the assets that get put there. And think about all that, the change that happens when people aren't killing one another en masse.
Right.
That in and of itself. You know, I think about Star Trek back in the late 60s, where, you know, he would go to different worlds and they'd all have conflict. And, you know, there were other dimensions where the United States and our world, either survived really well or didn't survive at all. And there's always kind of that balance. And we've gone through those aspects now a number of times, where Cuban Missile Crisis or different aspects of nuclear war, or who's going to be the first one to push the button. It always stops. And for that, I'm really, really thankful, because we're not going to survive those when everything goes that way.
Yeah.
There is that sense of, if that happens, there's no coming back.
Yeah.
I'm hoping that humanity maintains integrity, so that in 100 years, we're looking at a society that actually takes care of itself all the way down the line, through compassion, through authenticity, through that it shows up in kindness in the smallest ways. You know, just being human and allowing our basic human instincts, which is not anymore to club somebody over the head, but to see, how can I help them?
Love
I
that.
hope that answers the question.
It does. Yeah. No, the idea of looking to others and seeing how we can help them, and recognizing the folly of war, which is nothing more than sanctioned murder. That's all it is. It's it's fine for us to violate all of our rules and principles and values because we've labeled it war. This never sat well with me. It's like, you slapped a label on it, and it's a whole bunch of things that are crimes in everyday society, but now you're just saying it's fine because it's got
okay.
that label.
It's okay. Yeah, it's okay.
Yeah.
You know, you can do it. You can do it now. You can't do it later, but you can do it now.
That's right. And you can't do it to these people, but you can do it to these other people. None of that sits well with me. So, all right. So then here's the bigger question, always the harder question. What are all those right things? Because I said, hey, Scott, we did all the right things to get to this ideal future. What do we need to do to connect the dots to get from where we are right now, where wars do exist, where people aren't always hearing each other and trying to lift each other up? How do we get from here to there?
The imposition of not having nations and nation building to be able to not push the ideas there. Stronger doesn't mean better. There was a time when the U.S. was isolationist and allowed the world to exist as it was going to, rather than imposing how they viewed the world should be. And in pulling back, there is some of that. There's with a lot of countries, there is that pulling back of just not imposing everything. You look at the British Empire and the way that they were global, and they still have that global impact, but they've really isolated themselves. And for better or worse, and I have friends in UK, and everybody's a little bit mixed about it, but they're not going out and trying to take new territory. They're not trying to do all of that. And they're trying to manage themselves. They're really focusing on themselves. And that's the most important part. The United States could be self-sufficient in food, self-sufficient in energy, self-sufficient all the way down the line if we didn't export. That we wouldn't have to depend on all of these things that we've gone outside the country for. The Gulf Coast, in the Gulf of Mexico, we pump so much oil out of there that it isn't funny, out of California, out of Texas, and the like. So, there is that self-sufficiency that is there. What do we do on a day-to-day? We become more involved. One of the things I think that has happened is that there is a lack of involvement in everyday life. My dad didn't register to vote until he was about 50 years old. And the reason he would tell me is that he didn't want to serve on jury duty. So anytime, I know it's odd, but I would challenge him, and he'd start talking about taxes or something else. I said, I'm not listening. He said, what do you mean? I have my opinion. I said, no, you don't. You don't express it. You don't vote.
Yeah.
And he would get so ticked off at me because I've always been involved in local politics. In that, I show up, I get involved. And that is that isolation that is developed. This phone has made the world smaller, but I believe it's brought people further apart because the world comes to them rather than they having to go to it. And there's a lack of communication, there's a lack of cooperation, collaboration, and all of those things that make us human. And that's where society is broken down in that aspect, especially in the U.S., where there used to be three-generation families, and now everybody lives apart. And so you have that isolation even more so because, the kids move, and they move to California or Canada or Mexico or Florida, and they're not close, and you see them twice a year, and, that's it, rather than living in the house, rather than living close by, rather than, when I grew up, I had my aunts and uncles and all my cousins lived within 5 minutes of each other. We all lived in kind of the same place. They were never far away, and we all went to the same church, and there was a sense of community, and also there was a role. They showed you what roles were. They showed you what could be, should be. They came when anybody needed help, everybody showed up. And now I find it with a lot of people that I know, they don't have 5 people to call to be able to show up for them. And so it's, what do we have to do? I think bring families closer, bring people closer, bring all of that closer. I don't know about you, but I look for connection. Zoom is an absolute incredible thing. I look for connection in Zoom, in LinkedIn, in all those aspects. And I have friends now all over the world. And I call them friends because I've spent time with them. I spent a lot of this back and forth. We've exchanged ideas. We exchange, pictures. We talk about our families. We do all of those things and we share. And so we've developed that collaboration, that cooperation, and people who have the same understanding, on the same vibrational level, if you will. Much like you and I, the minute I met you, I knew who you were. I felt who you were. You are right there. You are fully involved with who you are. You are authentic to the end, and you never waver. And that grounding is so, for me, it's a magnet because I want to know people like you who have that within them. And I believe that's showing men and women that aspect of being fully embracing who they are, being authentic. And from there, they can give, they can share, they can go outside themselves and not be so isolated. And it's that isolation. When you take away the isolation, when you take away that meanness me, the ego, right? The ego mind. When you take that away and you expose people to other people and other ways and lacking of judgment, all of a sudden all the walls come down. And that's where I truly believe we need to do. We really need to do more and more of that, of breaking down the walls, because people are people are people. If I go to South Africa and I talk to somebody, there was a connection there that I didn't understand before. And all of a sudden the world becomes smaller in a different way.
In a beautiful way. Yeah, no, I feel that kindred spirit sense as well. I mean, talking about somebody who's very centered, you are. But let's just posit that maybe there might be a day that's a really hard day for you. Things get bad, you read a headline, you spill coffee on yourself, something just doesn't go well. You don't have the 10 minutes at the beginning of the day to really focus on yourself. You feel rushed into handling an emergency. When those days come up, Scott, what do you do? How do you get recentered? How do you get re-inspired so that you can once again be your great, kind, wonderful self?
Hopefully I can live up to that. So what I do, and I've done that, done the spill the coffee, going to an interview, right? Going to an interview, I'm in the car, coffee goes straight down over the tie, over the shirt, and I'm 3/4 of the way there. If I go home and change, I'm going to be late.
Right.
One of the things is I'm never late. And so I do the best I can, and I go to the interview. And I'm going to talk about the elephant in the room, and that is I've got coffee spilled down in front of me. So I make a joke about it, that I had a fight with coffee and the coffee won, and they laugh. And so, I take that part away because we're all human. We all have things happen. And instead of trying to be perfect, I allowed it to be as it is. This is me. This is how I handle. I wanted to show them this is how I handle when things come up. Yeah. So for me, it's about breath. It's about taking that breath. Because initially, you get that sense of anger, that sense of frustration, that sense of tightness. And so for me, that micro click to come back is, okay, is this all that important?
Right.
I talked so many times about first world problems versus third world problems. A first world problem is I spilled coffee on my shirt. A third world problem is how am I going to get water for the day? Yeah. And that always, and again, I come back to travel, I come back to perspective, I come back to how other people live. That allows me to just say, how important is it? It makes me ask the question, how important is it?
Yeah, I love that. I love the perspective taking, and I love the idea of grounding yourself in how important is this, and what does this show about me? That's a great thing for all of the listeners right now who are listening in on this great conversation. Remember, give yourselves permission to be who you are and to show other people how you handle difficult moments. That says a lot about you. And if what you're doing is raging in your car and just, moving, gesticulating wildly and spilling more coffee, now it's all over the interior of your car. Well, that says another thing about us, right? So be careful who you think you are in the moment, right?
Exactly. But also, bring it back to kindness. It allows you to be that human factor. I was always a perfectionist, and what I found is that I never could take that next step because everything wasn't perfect for me to take it. And I allowed myself to be a 95%er, because a 95 is still a good A, right? It's a strong A. It's still really good, but it allows for things to go wrong. It allows you to get a wrong answer. It allows you to be imperfect. And for me, that was little 5% made all the difference in the world, because I could step forward and do something even though everything wasn't exactly perfect or how I wanted it. And a lot of times when I did that, things turned out so much better than I planned.
Yeah. Scott, this is such a great conversation. I really appreciate you being here with us to share your insights and wisdom about kindness. If somebody wants to get into your orbit, where can they find you? How can they get your services? And we'll get to a couple of other questions related to that in a moment. But how can people find you?
My website, rscottholmes.com, is the easiest way. I'm on Facebook at rscott Holmes. I'm on LinkedIn at rscott Holmes. My first name is Richard. And the funniest thing is, I went to my mom and I said, I've been called Scott all my life since I was born, because my name is Richard Scott Holmes. I said, Mom, why did you name me Richard if you always called me Scott? She said, well, we thought Scott Holmes was too short. Never did quite understand it.
Okay.
Never quite understood that part of it or aspect of it. But sure. It was the R. Scott Holmes. Nobody else has that name going forward, and nobody has that name in writing. And so I'm good with that.
No, that's great. That's wonderful. And if people want to get some of your deep wisdom or to get your services, what do you offer? How do you help the world? We'll talk about the book in a second as well. But if somebody wanted to say, hey, Scott, how can you help me? What does that look like?
Well, I help professional men and women to find their authentic selves, a general statement like that. But what I do is I use all the different tools that I've learned in a different experience to be able to allow people to peel back those aspects that no longer serve them. I deal really with the chakras throughout the body, the energy centers, to be able to really get people back in their body. We don't listen to our bodies very well. When we get a headache, we just take an aspirin and we forget about it. But what's the reason we get a headache? So the body's telling us something that's going on and we don't listen. So when we bring somebody back in their body, all of a sudden perspective changes because they're not up here, they're in here. And then when we clear their energy systems and everything is flowing, they feel much more like themselves and they realize who they are. They find their authentic self, that person they came into this world with as. And when I ask people about where do you find joy, they might be able to answer it. And that's why we're here. We're not here just to suffer and survive and scrape by and just, work all the time. We're here to be able to enjoy the experience of being in this body, in this world.
Love that. Love that. Yeah. We're not here to help your corporation have slightly better earnings during the third quarter.
Exactly.
You're here to experience each other and enjoy. Let's talk just very quickly about the book, because it's coming out. What's the title one more time? And then where can they find it? And what's the release date so they know where to look?
So it's coming out on Amazon, and it's called From Burnout to Burning Bright. And it is coming out on May 19th, the publication date. It is 25 stories of healing, self-healing. And if you are in that position of feeling like you're in survival, that you're in overwhelm, this is a wonderful tool to be able to look at things in a different way, to be able to hear a story you can relate to be able to come back from the precipice and really not just survive, but be alive.
So all you listeners out there, be kind to yourselves and get a copy of this great book on May 19th. And then catch up with Scott. Let him know what you thought about it. Ask him questions. Get into his orbit, because Scott is a great person that you'll want to know better. So Scott Holmes, thank you again for coming on to Our Future is Kind.
Thank you so much. It was my pleasure.
This episode's Kindness Challenge. True kindness runs deeper than being nice. It's authentic human connection. This week, pause before one interaction and ask, if I were in their shoes, what would I need most right now? Then respond from that place. Want to stay inspired so you can stay kind? Scott reconnects with inspiration by deliberately slowing down, slowing his pace to notice what speed hides. Try walking a familiar route instead of driving it. Notice what you've been passing by unseen. You've been listening to Our Future is Kind podcast, where building what's next is a choice. Make your next choice a good one and help build the future we want to live in.